February 19, 1945. 0830 hours. Green Beach, northern sector of Iwo Jima. Corporal Tony Stein jumps from the ramp of the Higgins boat and his bare feet sink into black volcanic sand that hasn't yet cooled from the naval artillery fire. The sand sticks to his skin like hot tar. Around him, Marines of the 28th Regiment scream, "Run, fall." The air smells of gunpowder, salt, and something metallic he recognizes as blood. Above the beach, invisible in the volcanic rock, Japanese pillboxes begin to vomit fire. Type 92 machine guns, mortars, Arisaka rifles, everything calibrated for this exact slice of hell. Tony hoists the weapon he carries in his arms. It looks like nothing the Marines around him have ever seen. 23 pounds of improvised metal, hand-welded in a maintenance shed in Hawaii, using parts he salvaged himself from plane wreckage. The stock came from an M1 Garand. The bipod from a bar. The trigger mechanism was adapted with springs he tested for 3 weeks until he found the exact tension. But the heart of the weapon, the component that makes every battalion officer roll their eyes and every sergeant shake their head, is a Browning and /M2 aircraft machine gun, designed to be mounted in the wings of Hellcat fighters and cooled by 300-mile-per-hour winds at 25,000 feet. Not by a Jewish toolmaker from Dayton, Ohio, crouching in the black sand of a volcanic island where the ambient temperature is already over 85 degrees. Tony squeezes the trigger. The stinger explodes into life. 1,200 rounds per minute tear through the air. The sound isn't the sharp crack of an M1 Garand or the heavy chug of a bar. It is a chainsaw cutting through concrete. It is a continuous thunder that makes the Marines around him turn their heads, even under enemy fire. Red tracers slice the smoke in perfectly straight lines, converging on the narrow slit of a pillbox 100 yards away. Tony sees the impacts, white sparks on concrete, then the sudden silence of the Japanese machine gun that, seconds ago, was reaping men like wheat. He doesn't smile. There is no time. He can already feel the barrel heating up under his fingers, the heat rising through the metal like water boiling in a pipe. The battalion armorers said the barrel would melt. They said the Browning and /M2 would jam without the high-altitude airflow. They said Tony Stein was building a 23-pound coffin. He ignores the memory and keeps firing. 60 yards ahead, Marines from Company A are pinned down behind a low dune. Tony can see their helmets, the desperate gestures, the way they flinch every time a Japanese burst passes over their heads. He stands up, still barefoot because his boots tore apart in the sharp sand, and runs. Not toward the beach, toward the relative safety of the landing craft. Toward the fire. The stinger in his arms fires in short, controlled bursts. 3 seconds of fire. Pause. 3 seconds. Pause. Not because Tony is following some field manual. The Browning and /M2 has no infantry field manual, because no manual considers this possibility. But because he feels the metal, knows the point where steel begins to lose its temper, where the microscopic tolerances between the bolt and the chamber begin to expand. He is a toolmaker. He spent 5 years at the Delco tool factory in Dayton, measuring tolerances in thousandths of an inch, adjusting mills and lathes until metal cut metal with surgical precision. He didn't learn this in the Marines. He learned it on a factory floor lit by fluorescent lamps, where Jews like him could get jobs that other places wouldn't offer, where his fingers developed a tactile sensitivity that now, on this nightmare beach, is worth more than any military training. Tony reaches the pinned Marines and throws himself down beside them. The squad sergeant, a man from Missouri with a German surname Tony can't remember, yells something about a pillbox to the east. Tony follows the pointed finger and sees it. Not the pillbox itself, it is too well camouflaged, built inside the volcanic rock with only a narrow slit for the machine gun barrel, but the pattern of tracers exiting it, the deadly geometry keeping all of company and nailed to the sand. He positions the stinger on the bipod, adjusts the angle, and fires. The first burst misses. Tony sees the tracers pass 6 inches above the opening. He lowers the barrel, not much, maybe 2 degrees, and fires again. This time the bullets find the slit. Not all of them. They don't need to. At volumes of 1,200 rounds per minute, only a fraction needs to hit. Tony sees the sparks, hears the distinct sound of metal ricocheting off concrete, and then, silence. The Japanese machine gun stops. The Marines of Company A move instantly, years of training overriding the terror. They advance in alternating rushes, one man running while another covers, all coordinated without words because words are lost in the continuous roar of battle. Tony checks the stinger. The barrel is hot, not red, not yet, but hot enough to make the air ripple above it. More importantly, he is almost out of ammo. The Browning and /M2 fires the same .30-06 cartridge as the M1 Garand, but at volumes no infantry weapon was designed to sustain. Tony calculates mentally, 150 rounds left, maybe 200. 3 suppression bursts, for if he's economical. It's not enough. He turns to the nearest Marine, an 18-year-old kid with a baby face and eyes that have already seen more death than they should, and screams, "Collect every ammo belt you find. M1, bar, doesn't matter. If it's .30-06, I want it." The kid nods and disappears. Tony turns his attention back to the beach. The situation is worse than it looked from the boat. The Japanese built Iwo Jima to be invincible. 3 years of preparation, 18 miles of tunnels, 1,500 fortified positions. Every bunker has multiple exits, multiple fields of fire, built not to resist, but to kill. The Japanese defense philosophy on this island isn't to hold territory, it is to bleed the Americans until the cost of victory outweighs the will to fight. And it's working. Tony can see bodies on the sand. Marines who didn't make it past the waterline. Some are still moving, screaming for medics who can't reach them through the machine gun fire sweeping the beach in overlapping patterns, every kill sector calibrated to leave no dead angles. He feels anger, not the hot, impulsive anger that makes men make mistakes, but the cold, focused anger that his father, a tailor who fled pogroms in Poland, always said was the only useful emotion. Anger that heats is a fire that burns down your own house, his father used to say in Yiddish, adjusting seams under the dim light of his shop in Dayton. Anger that cools is metal on the anvil. You shape it. You use it. Tony shapes his anger into geometry. He studies the enemy fire patterns, identifies positions by the origin of the tracers, calculates angles of approach. It is no different from planning a machining sequence. First this operation, then that one, each step preparing for the next. He sees a route. Dangerous, exposed at 3 points, but possible. And at the end of that route is a bunker that is slaughtering Marines trying to move up from the beach. The baby-faced kid runs back, arms loaded with ammo belts he ripped off dead Marines. Tony doesn't ask where they came from. He reloads the stinger with practiced movements, 3 seconds to eject the empty belt, 2 seconds to insert the new one, 1 second to check the feeder. 6 seconds total. He practiced this 50 times in Hawaii, timing it with a pocket watch, until his fingers knew the movements even in the dark, even under stress. The investment of time now pays dividends in survival. Tony takes a deep breath, the volcanic sand in the air makes his lungs burn, and runs. 30 yards in open terrain, completely exposed, the stinger in his arms because it is too heavy to carry any other way. He doesn't run in a straight line. He changes direction every 5 steps, a random pattern he saw rabbits use when fleeing hunters in the woods of Ohio. Japanese bullets tear up the sand behind him, behind because the gunners are adjusting for a target that is no longer where they expected. He dives behind a pile of wreckage, twisted pieces of metal that were, 15 minutes ago, an Amtrak. The smell of burning diesel oil and charred flesh makes his stomach turn, but he ignores it. He positions the stinger, finds the target, the bunker opening is so small he almost loses it, and fires. 3 bursts of 3 seconds. The bunker falls silent. Tony doesn't wait to confirm the kill. He is already moving, running to the next position, because stationary is dead and dead helps no one. The black sand cuts his bare feet. He can feel the slick blood between his toes, but there is no pain, not yet, only the abstract awareness that this will be a problem later, if there is a later. Further ahead, he sees a group of Marines pinched between 2 bunkers, a crossfire turning the space between them into a meat grinder. They tried to advance, Tony can see the bodies marking their attempts, but now they are trapped, unable to move forward or backward without being cut in half. Tony doesn't think. Thinking takes time and time kills. He simply acts, years of factory instinct translated into a military context. When a part is jammed in the machine, you don't stare at it. You kill the power, you remove the obstruction, you restore the flow. The stinger is the tool. Suppression fire is the method. Tony fires at the nearest bunker, not trying to kill, just forcing the Japanese to keep their heads down, creating 3 seconds of silence in which men can move. Then he switches to the second bunker, repeats the process. The Marines understand instantly. They move during the brief silences, running in short, desperate sprints, and when Tony sees the last man reach cover, he allows a small knot of tension in his chest to loosen. 9 men. He just saved 9 men. Not by killing Japanese, though he did that too, but by creating space, creating time, using volume of fire to dominate the geometry of battle. That is what the stinger does. It is no more lethal than a bar in terms of each individual bullet. But 1,200 rounds per minute changed the math of combat. When Tony fires, enemy positions go silent not because he killed everyone inside them, but because no soldier, no matter how brave or fanatical, keeps his head up when bullets are ricocheting off the bunker opening in a continuous stream. The stinger creates fear. It creates hesitation. And in battle, hesitation is death. Tony is learning this in real time, without a field manual, without doctrine, just instinct and observation. Decades later, the military will write papers on suppression fire, on how volume of fire can be more valuable than individual precision, on how the psychology of combat changes when the enemy cannot raise their head. But here, now, on February 19, 1945, Tony Stein is inventing these tactics on the fly, each 3-second burst an empirical experiment in lethality. The stinger gets hot. Not metaphorically. The barrel is literally too hot to touch. Tony can see heat waves rising from it, can feel the thermal radiation on his face when he leans over the sight. The armorers were right about one thing. The Browning and /M2 needs cooling. It was designed for freezing high-altitude winds, not the still, hot air of a tropical beach. But the armorers were wrong about the conclusion. The barrel doesn't melt. Not yet. Tony can feel the metal approaching the limit. He knows steel, knows the transformation points where the crystal structure begins to change, but it hasn't reached it yet. He has maybe 5 more minutes of sustained fire before he needs to let the gun cool. 5 minutes. He will use them well. The morning drags on into an eternity of violence. The sun rises over Iwo Jima, turning the black sand into a surface that radiates heat like a stove top. Marines cook in their combat uniforms, sweat running in streams that leave white salt trails on skin covered in volcanic dust. Tony has lost count of how many bunkers he silenced. 6. 8. The numbers begin to blur, each enemy position merging into the next in a continuous sequence of run, position, fire, move. But he keeps a precise count of something else: ammunition. The Stinger consumes .30-06 like an engine consumes gasoline. In sustained combat, Tony is firing more ammo in 10 minutes than a standard Marine with an M1 Garand would fire in an entire day. The math is brutal and inflexible. He has made 5 runs back to the beach. 5 times running back through enemy fire, barefoot on sand that cuts like glass, to rip ammo belts off dead and wounded Marines. Some were still alive when he arrived. They looked at him with eyes that didn't understand why anyone would run toward the beach, toward the thickest fire, toward the place where men went to die. Tony didn't explain. He just took their ammo belts, sometimes stripping them from bodies still warm, and ran back. There is no room for guilt in battle. Dead Marines don't need ammo. Living Marines do. The equation is simple and terrible. On the 6th run back to the beach, Tony finds more than ammo. He finds a Marine, can't be more than 19, with his abdomen opened by mortar shrapnel. The kid is conscious, which is worse. He is trying to hold his intestines inside his body with shaking, bloody hands. He sees Tony and whispers something. Tony can't hear over the roar of battle. He leans closer. "My mom," the kid says. "Tell her it didn't hurt." It's a lie. It hurts. Tony can see it in the kid's eyes, in the way his body spasms involuntarily. But he nods. "I'll tell her." Tony lies back. "What's her name?" The kid says the name. Tony memorizes it, adds it to the growing list in his mind. Names of men he made promises to, addresses in cities he's never visited, messages for mothers he will never meet. He doesn't know if he will survive to deliver these messages, but he memorizes them anyway, because it is the only thing he can do. Then he grabs the ammo belts next to the kid and runs back to the battle. There are no medics to call. The medics are overwhelmed, triaging hundreds of wounded, prioritizing who can be saved. A Marine with exposed intestines in the kill zone? He has already been triaged. He has already been abandoned. Tony doesn't look back. He can't. There are living Marines who can still be saved, and he has a weapon that can save them. The arithmetic of war is brutal. One dying man counts less than 10 men who might live. Tony hates the arithmetic, but he follows it anyway. By noon, the Stinger is showing problems. Not jamming. Tony calibrated the bolt tolerance too well for that, but something more subtle. The rate of fire is dropping. 1,200 rounds per minute has dropped to maybe 1,000. The difference is noticeable only to someone who knows the gun intimately, who can hear the change in the rhythm of the fire, who understands that the deceleration means the recoil spring is losing tension, that the heat is altering the metallurgical properties of the steel. Tony stops behind a rocky outcrop and partially disassembles the Stinger. His fingers work by tactile memory, identifying problems he can't see. The spring return is okay. The bolt is worn but functional. The problem is the barrel. It is too hot for too long, and the steel is losing its temper. Tony knows what he needs to do. He needs to let the gun cool. 20 minutes, maybe 30, allowing the barrel to return to ambient temperature, letting the metallurgical structure stabilize. It is the correct procedure. It is what any armorer would recommend. He ignores the procedure. Because 50 yards away, Marines from Company B are pinned under fire from 3 overlapping bunkers, and 20 minutes is too long, and he can make the Stinger last 10 more minutes, maybe 15 if he is careful. Tony reassembles the gun, checks the feed, and returns to combat. The Stinger fires raggedly now, the rate of fire inconsistent, but it still fires, still spits bullets at volumes no other infantry weapon can match. And when Tony points it at the bunkers that are slaughtering Company B, when he presses the trigger and feels the familiar recoil, the vibration rising through his arms and shoulders, he doesn't think about the overheated barrel or the degraded tolerances. He thinks only of the Marines he can see running, using the seconds of suppression he creates, moving from cover to cover, advancing yard by yard through hell. At 1,430 hours, the Stinger dies. Not dramatically. Not with an explosion or catastrophic jam. It simply stops firing. Tony presses the trigger and nothing happens. He does the immediate action drill, failure to feed, empty ammo, obstruction, but it isn't any of that. The firing mechanism simply isn't engaging anymore. The heat finally won. The springs lost tension. The tolerances expanded beyond the point where the bolt can cycle. The gun that shouldn't work finally stopped working. Tony looks at the Stinger for a long moment. He built this weapon. Spent 3 weeks in a maintenance shed in Hawaii, welding, adjusting, testing, ignoring every officer who said it was impossible, every sergeant who said it was suicide. He proved them all wrong. And now it is dead. He feels something strange. Not sadness, exactly, but a loss that is almost physical. Then he remembers where he is. Iwo Jima. February 19, 1945. The bloodiest battle in the history of the Marine Corps. Feelings can wait. Tony leans the Stinger against a rock. Maybe he can fix it later, if there is a later, and picks up an M1 Garand from a dead Marine. The rifle feels light in his hands, almost like a toy after the 23 pounds of the Stinger. He checks the chamber, confirms it's loaded, and continues fighting. But it is different now. The M1 Garand is an excellent weapon, reliable, accurate, with enough stopping power to drop a man at 500 yards. But it fires 8 rounds before reloading. 8 rounds compared to the Stinger's 1,200 per minute. There is no comparison. Tony can still kill Japanese, but he can no longer dominate entire fields of fire. He can no longer create those windows of suppression that allowed Marines to move. He is just another rifle now. Just another Marine on a beach full of them. He discovers that he hates it. Not the danger, he has been in danger all morning, but the impotence. With the Stinger, he could change the flow of the battle. He could see a problem, pinned Marines, active bunker, and solve it. Now he can only react, responding to threats instead of shaping them. It is the difference between being a craftsman and being a tool. Tony spends the rest of the afternoon as regular infantry. He shoots Japanese, runs from cover to cover, throws grenades into bunker openings, does everything he was taught in training, everything thousands of other Marines are doing along the beach. And it all feels insufficient. By nightfall, when the Marines finally establish a precarious perimeter on the black sand, when the Japanese fire dwindles to sporadic firefights instead of continuous slaughter, Tony goes back to where he left the Stinger. It is still there. No one touched it. Maybe because it looks too broken, too improvised, too strange to be useful. Or maybe because all the Marines who saw it work are dead. Tony picks it up and carries it back to the company, a staging area. His feet, still barefoot, now raw and bleeding, leave dark footprints in the sand. He barely notices. A sergeant sees him and yells, "Stein, where the hell have you been?" Tony doesn't answer. He just drops the Stinger in the sand and sits beside it. He should feel pride. Should feel relief for having survived. Should feel anything. But he is numb, empty, as if he used all his emotions in the last 8 hours and nothing is left. The sergeant keeps talking, something about casualty counts, about positions held, about the next offensive, but Tony doesn't process the words. He is looking at the Stinger, at the weapon he built with his own hands, and thinking about the toolmaker he was before the war. That man measured tolerances in thousandths of an inch, built molds for automotive parts, went home every night to his wife Rose, washed the grease from his hands, ate dinner at the kitchen table talking about normal things, house payments, the annoying neighbor, whether they should paint the fence. That man is gone. Tony doesn't know exactly when. Maybe when his landing craft dropped the ramps and he first saw the black beach. Maybe when he made his first run back to the beach looking for ammo from the dead. Maybe when he looked into the eyes of that dying kid and lied about the pain. It doesn't matter. The toolmaker from Dayton is dead, and in his place is this thing, this barefoot Marine covered in blood and volcanic sand who just spent 8 hours killing men with a weapon he built in a maintenance shed. Stein. Tony looks up. It is the company captain, a man from Boston with an Irish surname Tony always forgets. "Sir," Tony says automatically. "I heard what you did today," the captain says. "I heard you saved half the damn company with that thing." He points to the Stinger. "How many Japanese did you kill?" Tony doesn't know. Didn't count. So he invents a number that seems reasonable. 20, sir. Maybe more. The captain nods slowly. 20, he repeats. With an aircraft machine gun. A weapon every armorer in the battalion said wouldn't work. It worked, sir. I see that. The captain crouches beside the Stinger, examining it with the look of someone who understands tools. Can you fix it? Tony considers. The firing mechanism needs new springs. The barrel needs to be replaced or at least retempered. The feed system needs to be recalibrated. Yes, sir, he says. If I have parts, I'll get your parts. The captain stands up. Because tomorrow we're going up that mountain. He points to Suribachi, the extinct volcano dominating southern Iwo Jima, its dark silhouette cut against the reddish twilight sky. And I want you out front with this damn thing working. Understood? Yes, sir. The captain leaves. Tony looks back at the Stinger. Tomorrow he will fix it. He will test the new springs, he will recalibrate the tolerances, He will make it sing again at 1200 rounds per minute. And after tomorrow, he will carry it up the slope through enemy fire. He will use it to silence bunkers and save Marines. He will make 8 more runs under fire because the Stinger eats ammo like fire eats oxygen. He will do all this because he is a Marine and Marines follow orders. But tonight, sitting in the black sand with his bleeding bare feet and the sun setting over a blood-stained beach, Tony Stein allows a single question to enter his mind. Is it worth it? Not the war. He has already decided about the war. Pearl Harbor, the Holocaust, all the reasons why a Jewish toolmaker from Dayton enlisted. But this specific violence, these methods. Tony built the Stinger to save American lives. And he saved them, there is no doubt about that. Those 9 Marines he pulled from the crossfire. The men of Company B he covered. Dozens of others who lived because he created windows of suppression at the right moment. But he also turned 20 Japanese into corpses. 20 men who were someone's sons, someone's husbands, someone's fathers. 20 men who woke up this morning not knowing that a toolmaker from Ohio had built a weapon specifically efficient at killing them. The math of war says it's worth it. 20 dead enemies versus dozens of saved allies. Simple equation. But Tony is discovering that math doesn't capture everything. It doesn't capture how he feels taking ammo from dying men. It doesn't capture the weight of promises made to boys who won't see another dawn. It doesn't capture what it means to build something with your own hands specifically to destroy. He was a toolmaker. He built things. Now he builds death. Tony closes his eyes. Tomorrow he will think about this. Tomorrow he will fix the Stinger and kill more Japanese and save more Marines. Tomorrow he will be the hero the captain wants, the Marine the Corps needs. But tonight, just for a few minutes before the numbness of exhaustion takes him, Tony Stein from Dayton, Ohio, toolmaker, Jew, Marine, allows doubts to exist. And then he buries them, deep down, where they won't get in the way of the work that still needs to be done.